What's up, everybody? How's it going? It's Tuesday again. Let's get a little tactical today. I thought it would be fun to, now that the 9th edition Tyranid Codex is officially out, we would go through some of the lists that played at least over the last week or two and talk about exactly how the faction's doing. I played some games over the weekend as well with it, and I'll give kind of my thoughts so far on the new Tyranid Codex because, man, it is a divisive release, I think, so far. How's it going, everybody? I hope everyone had a good weekend. Hope everyone got some games in. Hope everybody's, playing with all this new exciting stuff. And, I don't know. I was just having a great time with it. What's up, everybody? So I played, to start things off, I don't know how long I'm going to talk about my event this weekend, because it wasn't that interesting, to be honest. I played in an RTT. I did a poll on Twitter of whether or not I should play Harpies. Twitter said I should, so I blame them for the Harpies that I played, although I probably shouldn't have. I put double Harpy on the table. I was up base coating my Harpies earlier. The event I played in didn't have a painting standard. It didn't require battle ready. So I didn't have to put my Tyranid, but we did put 3 colors on the Harpies at least. And we put 2 of them down on the table for a tournament. And unfortunately, Harpy things happened. I played a double Leviathan patrol. It had 2 Flying Hive Tyrants, one with Reaper of Obliterax, one with Maw Claws, 2 Maleceptors, one in a drop pod, the other one just on the table. There were 2 units of just main units of warriors, Tyrant Guard, Venom Thropes, obviously. I elected not to take Zone Thropes because the keyword hasn't yet been fixed. Not that that's a huge issue. A lot of places have, ruled that they do have the Synapse keyword, but I elected not to take them for that reason. And tried to basically build a list that didn't require it. Would have been nice to have on the Carnifexes, I think, and as an option for Hive Nexus, but I ended up not taking it. And then 2 Harpies, one with the Synaptic Augment, the other one with Dermic Symbiosis. And for the most part, 2 of my games were pretty one-sided. I played against a Space Wolves player. We had a very fun time, although Harpies did Harpy things. I had a Maleceptor in the center of the table that I ended up going first, which was a big deal, obviously. I put a Maleceptor in the middle of the table under Encephalic Diffusion. My opponent had 2 big units of Eradicators. They, between the Encephalic Diffusion, I think he was outside of the Venom Thrope aura. But I also had Catalyst on him. Between all that, basically my opponent's entire army bounced off that guy. I had Murderfang over here, left Murderfang on just a couple of wounds. Murderfang went in to try to kill this Maleceptor that had dropped down to do some mortal wounds to guys in the building. Ended up, I think, barely leaving the Maleceptor alive. And the Maleceptor ended up killing him with mortal wounds as well. Harpy, things happened and they shot all the Eradicators to death. I did have an interesting game round 2. It was the Tyranid mirror match that ended up being a super duper close one. Highfleet Kraken versus Leviathan. I think Kraken generally has a little bit of the leg up on Leviathan, at least in the mirror, because Leviathan, unless you're building very heavy for warriors or something, tends to lack objective secured. So my opponent was able to steal the objectives away from me really, really easily, but 2 Harpies to 1 Harpy meant that I was sort of generically doing more damage over the course of the game than they were. And although they did get 1 Maleceptor turn 1 with a Hive Tyrant with a Reaper of Obliterax using the plus 8 advanced strat to get in on my deployment zone and then encircle him to get out of the way, I was able to clear out enough of the multi-wound infantry that I was able to squeak that one by. Although I did, I think my opponent and I both made some mistakes this game. I forgot at one point a very crucial psychic interrogation that I could have rolled out, and I totally didn't. I just totally forgot, and I did a smite instead, and that was a mistake. But I ended up squeaking that one by pretty close. And that put me in the finals, and I played against Farsight Enclaves. My opponent went first and Doom dropped me, and I kind of had this happen a couple times where the Crisis Battlesuit team either Doom drops or plus 8 advances from the Cold Star Commander and advances up close and personal to the Tyranid army. And I think one thing that might be a good topic at some point for videos, how to play against Tyranids. And I think one of the ways to do it is not do that. Don't get close to them, because outside Harpies and sort of potentially Hive Tyrants, the Tyranid army is very slow and doesn't project threat very far. So if you keep it at arm's length and you try to take what you can in terms of with your ranged attacks and whittled them down and play the attrition game, I think you're much better off. Force them to come forward and make those little legs work. And my opponent sort of gave me the opportunity to hit him. So he had he basically frontline deployed and then put a big crisis team in the middle here. Right in the center ruin here with the Doom Drop to take some shots at some guys in the back. I had kept the Maleceptor pretty far back, so he was being hidden, and I lost a couple ancillary units. I lost a couple warriors, I think, to that drop. But the -1 to hit really affected from the Venom Thropes. Really affected Tau, obviously, and then being able to hide most of my army also was useful. And then I dropped the second Maleceptor in that turn, and we just plowed a billion mortal wounds out. Harpies did harpy things. We didn't even circle the harpies that game. They just ran around and eventually got shot to death, but took basically 2 full rounds of shooting from the Tau army to get to be taken out. And really, there was, because my opponent had sped so aggressively, really there was very little they can do. You definitely have to trade up into a Tyranid army, and you can't do that if you're flinging your big expensive units away. You kind of have to wait for the Tyranid player to come out and fight them. So I ended up winning the tournament, but to be honest, as much as I'm sure my opponents felt defeated, and I empathize with them, it was kind of a hollow victory because I don't like this Codex, chat. I do not like it very much. I think I've been trying to sort of compile my thoughts about it over the course of the last week or so, and I think that the power level is too high. The kind of the constant fugue of typographical errors and mechanical issues with the Codex is sort of gives it I lost my word, unfortunately. Just sort of fogs it up, I guess. Just makes it, feel not so great. There's always has to be a rules discussion before the game of how you actually want to, play rules. You have to talk to anytime you would play the Codex, you basically have to talk to a TO to make them house rule things so they actually work. That sucks. I hate that. No game should have that. Full stop. And just the upper echelon of the Codex is just insane. And I think it's mostly the aircraft. I actually don't think that the more I play with them, I don't think Maleceptors are quite as insane as people think they are. They're probably too undercosted for their defensive profile, but the damage that they do is very short range. So they are kind of the poster children. And also, I actually don't think that they're quite worth being taken outside of Hive Fleet Kraken, because if you don't have access to Hive Nexus to superpower them up, they're not really going to do that much damage. And compared to some of the other options in the Codex that are a little bit more well-rounded, I would also almost in a lot of situations rather have an Exocrine than a Maleceptor, unless I have the full combo and I can combo them off on them. So I think that stuff is okay. I do think that the aircraft are silly. Including them in your army kind of removes a lot of the gameplay, because if your opponent doesn't have the firepower to kill them on the top of turn 1, which almost no armies do because they're so hard to kill, they're sitting in the back of your deployment zone, they're far away, they're -2 to be hit, so even if you have a hit buff, you get around it. One of them is transhuman, the other one is Dermic Symbiosis all the time. The Dermic Symbiosis one can also be transhuman for 1 CP, at least in a High Fleet Cronus or High Fleet Leviathan list, excuse me. And then you can encircle them at the end of the turn. So there's no downside to pushing them forward and kind of over committing with them. If you do get situations where you can hide them on turn 1, there's basically no counterplay. And the only way to
It's all perfectly legitimate, Travi, from Nurgle Matthew.
Nurgle man, thanks for the super chat, dude. It's super legitimate. It's all fine. Everything's fine. We're all fine here now. How are you? But yeah, I don't know. I think the faction has a real problem in that some of the stuff in it's too good, and it kind of sucks because I don't like having to couch my play because of the power level. I don't think that the aircraft Play pattern is particularly interesting for either player. I don't enjoy playing harpies. My opponent doesn't enjoy playing against harpies. No one's having fun in that situation. But if you don't play that, you know, you're playing suboptimally, which is fine, but doesn't feel great. And you open yourself up to situations where, because, like I said before, the Codex is so slow, you don't have the ability to interact with your opponent, you know, beyond the midline of the table, and your opponent can really take advantage of that. So harpies shore up an actual weakness that the faction has, but they do it so well that, like, you might as well not play. So it's feeling bad. Chat is where I'm at with that. And I'm not super happy with the Codex, to be honest. I think there are things in it that I really like. I like the Hive Tyrant play. I think that's super fun. I like the Maleceptor combo. I think that's good. And it's also, you know, sort of, it's interesting. I like doing mortal wounds to people. I like having to play through the mini game of actually setting up a Maleceptor and getting it into place. I think that stuff's great, and I think that the fact that there's a lot of other archetypes that you can play in the Codex is awesome, but the top level of the power level in the Codex is too high. And, you know, it is what it is. I think that is... I think that's just where we're at. And unfortunately, it feels like it's sort of a victim of the power creep that's in the game currently, where these new codexes are they're just insane on release. They're far and away the best thing in the game as soon as they come out, and there's very little that can be done about them, you know, in a reasonable time frame, because Games Workshop, the time between Codex release and errata or FAQ is growing longer and longer as these new codexes come out. Games Workshop has been really reticent to change them proactively. You know, we saw the Custodes Codex be dominant for almost 4 months through January. We saw from January through the data slate. Obviously, the Eldari Codex got hit relatively quickly, but it still took them almost a month to do that. And the Tau Empire Codex, you know, was around almost as long as Custodes. So it seems like at the very least, this Tyranid Codex is probably going to be at this level for a couple months. We don't, because it released basically in line with a data slate, we can't rely on a data slate to change it, because if it remains at this power level through the next data slate, we're going to have this faction be at this level for another 6 months. And we're going to have to deal with these uninteractable units that cannot be attacked by your opponent, are just totally, what's the word? I'm off my game today, Chan. I apologize. There's no risk involved with using them, because you can send things back into Deep Strike, because you can, play these super aggro game plans and not get punished for it. But on the other hand, you kind of have to, because the faction has some weaknesses elsewhere, and I don't love that. I think that's really upsetting and sad. Oh my god. So, anyway, that's what I have to say about that. But what I wanted to do is not talk about necessarily how my games went, but some of the other games that have been the Tyranid players around the block have been putting up, because we did see a pretty resounding showing for Tyranids over this last weekend. We saw a couple GT 5-0s, a lot of 4-1s using the new Codex, and I'd like to talk about those a little bit. What's the outstanding NID stuff on the nerf radar? I think harpies for sure. If I were to give my quick thoughts on what I think should be changed in the Codex, I think Encircle the Prey, honestly, I think it's likely it becomes once per game you can use it. I think that an alternative would be that it can only affect infantry. And while I really like that right now it affects Hive Tyrants, and I'm super biased, I think, because I really like Hive Tyrants, and I like the Hive Tyrant play right now. But I think it would be a small price to pay to negatively impact Hive Tyrants and Trigons and things like that in exchange for nerfing the aircraft interaction. So I think Encircle the Prey needs to be changed. Either it becomes once per game, it loses the ability to target monsters, or potentially you could make it like end of the morale phase instead of end of turn, which turns off a lot of the scoring shenanigans you can do with it. I think Harpies in general are too cheap. They need to go up probably at least 60 points. I think between 230 and like 250 range for a Harpy is probably good. So between 60 and 80 points. I think Maliceptors, you could see a little bit of an increase. They're too easily spammable, I think. Although, like I said, their effect is so short-ranged that I haven't felt like it's been that big of a deal. And because they're so slow, they have to stand in line of sight to get to be in range to impact you with their ability if they want to hit like the center objective with it. So oftentimes you have to deploy them in line of sight, and they just get alpha off the table. That happens quite a bit. Storm armies don't have the ability to chew through Maliceptors that easily, but a lot of armies do, and then they're just dead. But other than that, I think the remainder of the Codex is in a very interesting spot. And I would hope that, you could maybe bring up some of the archetypes that aren't quite as good. Gants, for example, are wildly overcosted, and I think you could like bump them down a peg to give the faction more options to hold objectives, while nerfing this top echelon stuff. There's also stuff that needs to be clarified. Obviously, the Zoanthrope keyword thing is really stupid. Zoanthropes don't have the Synapse keyword, for those who don't know, which means that there is no way to get access to the Zoanthrope imperative, because it requires a Zoanthrope Synapse unit, and none of those exist right now. Overrun needs to be clarified. It's worded very poorly currently. And there is an argument, and to be fair, I think it is a good argument to be made that the stratagem effectively doesn't exist. It effectively doesn't do anything. So that's like something that if you're going to a tournament, you have to ask UTO about. Are you going to allow me to use the stratagem, basically? Fortunately, we don't have any like devastating keyword issues like the Craftword Codex had. But like this stuff is unacceptable for these new releases. It's just insane, especially for a book that you're charging $60 for that was already out of date when it came out because the body good rule had been changed before the Codex was released. So yeah, I don't know. I think the real sort of problem with I guess the danger of playing Tyranids and playing competitively right now and not kind of pushing the most competitive stuff is that I do think the Codex has the potential to struggle against other top tier codexes if you're not playing the super busted stuff. I think they're so powerful it pushes it over the edge. And the mirror match is probably very rough. If your opponent has Harpies and you don't, they have total control basically, and there's nothing you can do about it. At least if you both have Harpies, you can both trade the damage back and forth. But until that gets fixed, it's going to be tough to play 40k competitively for a while because I think the Codex is clearing away the best. It's very difficult to hold a candle to it, and if you're not playing Harpies, like what are you doing? Oh my god. Hiveguard get core. I could see Hiveguard getting core, especially with the indirect fire change. Yeah, I could see that for sure. I would they were already struggling before the Codex even released, and even now with the indirect fire change, they're doing even worse. So rip. Poor Hiveguard. I would like to see Hiveguard getting core back would be good. You could push their gun up to 36 inches again or something like that. I don't know. Do I think the Maliceptor 7+ effect should be nerfed? I don't know. I think you could nerf it a little bit. I think if you make it like once per turn or something, I think the Maliceptor goes to being like this just useless idiot. They do a lot of damage. Like again, they basically have a 12-inch range gun that shoots super hard, right? And they do a lot of damage if you can get into range with the gun, but if you can't, they don't do anything. And I think that's fine. That play pattern is fine. I think the problem is that you can take so many Maliceptors and they're still so efficient, and that's where the problem lies. But I actually don't think the effect itself is that good. Not that it's not good. I don't think it's that broken. I don't think it's that overpowered. Vi 2877 Raveners are a core part of Tyranid armies going forward with multiple options for secondaries. Yeah, so after playing against High Fleet Kraken, I will say I've been one thing that I've appreciated over the course of my last couple of games playing is that I played against a lot of different Tyranid builds and talked through a lot of sort of non-standard archetypes. And I do think that the depth of the Codex is really impressive because a lot of them sound really powerful. And a lot of them have really impressed me. I think High Fleet Kraken, probably a sleeper hit. You have the ability to push Warriors and Raveners to insane speeds with opportunistic advance, and the real combo is that your Onslaught is almost automatically castable with the Neurothrope. So there's no downside to using that opportunistic advance, and Kraken has a CP regen Warlord trait, so spending the CP to make your army significantly faster isn't even that much of a cost because you're probably regenning. Unlike every other faction in Tyranids, no one else can CP regen besides Kraken, and I think that's great. And I think that the faster stuff in Tyranids is definitely going to have a more of a place in a faction like High Fleet Kraken. So I think Kraken's probably a sleeper. I was just talking on stream yesterday about how Gorgon might be actually a little bit of a sleeper, especially in the mirror match. You can really build to punish other Tyranid players with the High Fleet Gorgon's 4+ poison ability. I find it difficult to consider an answer right now because of how prevalent harpies are going to be, and I think and how stupid they are. So I think it's it's going to be tough because you take sort of crippling damage uninteractably from your opponent every turn, and there's not really a counterplay in Tyranids that fights that. And you might just be putting exocrines on the table and hoping for the best, basically, or exocrines, or even like rupture cannons or something, and then just like crossing your fingers that you go first and can kill their harpy. And that's not a good place to be, but at least it's something. But other than that, I think all of the Tyranid, or a lot of the Tyranid sub-factions are actually very interesting to me. So that's been something that's really surprising to me. Tyranid psychic powers being indirect and undeniable because of Synapse feels bad to play against. I mean, yes and no. I can understand how it would feel bad, especially if your army is contingent on psychic denial. But I think Tyranids. I don't think the faction could sustain, having the psychic powers be shorter range. Not that I think, once you get to a point on psychic power casts, it doesn't really matter, right? Like, the fact that the Neurothrope can be on your table edging casting spells doesn't really make a difference between it being able to launch the spells 24 inches, for example. At 18 to 24-ish, you're probably out of range of enemy denies anyway. But if you made them, 12 inches or something, I think the faction would have a really tough time because of how reliant they are on psychic powers like Onslaught. I mentioned that they're very slow. Like, outside of flying Hive Tyrants and Aircraft, basically the fastest unit in the Codex is move 12. And none of it is that hard to kill. It's efficient in terms of, wound count per points is very efficient, but it's their armor saves are generically bad. And you have to jump through, some hoops to give them any other defensive buffs. So you can't, for example, run Raveners to the center of the table and expect the unit to survive, because it will not. They will all be dead. So having access to something like Onslaught to make them faster is kind of core to how the faction operates. And I think if you take that away, they would be much, much more difficult to play. And I don't think that that's, particularly broken or anything. Being able to advance in charge with a move 6 unit or even a move 12 unit is good, but a lot of factions of the game can do something similar. One thing to consider is that knights are about to get released and bum rush everyone anyway. I mean, maybe, yeah, maybe knights are the answer we've been looking for. Maybe they have a ignore hit modifier penalty and they go first and kill all the aircraft on the table, and then it's fine. Who knows? Obsec playing well. Chronos playing well, excuse me, with the Obsec 5 biomorph. Yeah, Chronos seems okay. I don't hate Chronos. Warhammer Harpies -2 to hit. They're -1 innately. And then they have the Venom Throws give them -1. Think you should be able to deny as long as you're next to whatever is being linked to. That would be very bad. That would be terrible. I don't think that's how that should work at all. Exocrine is amazing. Hell yeah, Exocrine is good. So anyway, chat, let's take a look at some of the lists that have been doing well. So I'm over on my very good friends over here, Discount Games Incorporated, where we aggregate a lot of top tournament lists. And so what I'd like to do is just go through some of the tournaments from this past weekend and take a quick look at the Tyranid lists that are doing pretty well. I think there were a couple tournaments last weekend, but I think generally speaking they did use the old version. Yeah, they used Crusher Stampede and stuff. But this past weekend, a lot of new Tyranid armies were popping up because they were allowed to use the new Codex. So it looks like this one, Radicalism, used the old Codex, so that was Crusher Stampede. We have Dawn of Afar. So here we go. New Codex coming. So coming in at 4-1. Sveinung Noding. I'm sure that's how it works. I'm sure I didn't mispronounce that at all, and I'm great. So this is, we have a sort of standard High Fleet Leviathan, and I imagine that this is basically going to be where most armies start. Yeah. We do have a Rupture Cannon in this one. Oop, I'm a little bit off the screen here. Let's fix that. Can we do this? Nope, that's my overlay. We don't want to change that. Let's do this. All right, good enough. We're gonna have to pop it off the edge a little bit. That's fine. All right. So I think Hive Tyrants are so good, and especially because you want to get the most efficiency out of your Tyrant Guard if you're bringing them, you probably want double patrol. And I think the vast majority of Tyranid lists we're going to be seeing are going to be double patrol, so you can get 2 Hive Tyrants in here. So this one's double patrol Hive Fleet Leviathan. We have a Winged Hive Tyrant, Reaper of Obliterax. This guy's got perfectly adapted on him. Interesting that we have a Winged Hive Tyrant and then a Foot Tyrant, but the Winged Hive Tyrant's the one with perfectly adapted. I think that's kind of fascinating. We have a big unit of Tyranid Warriors, 9 Tyranid Warriors, Death Spitters, Venom Cannons, Adrenal Glands, Flesh Hooks, so we get access to the +1 to hit stratagem. I imagine that this event allowed the Zone Thrope ability to trigger. I actually think Tyranid Warriors might be a little bit squishy without the Zone Thrope imperative, so I definitely like them a lot more if you are using the Zone Thrope imperative, but it's almost worth dropping them for other stuff if you don't have it. Because the unit tends to actually get killed in one turn. They, despite the fact that they're perma transhuman, they're 3 wounds each. Turns out that doesn't really matter so much, especially since if you're trying to build against Tyranids, there are specific profiles that are very good against the majority of the faction, and especially if you're worried about High Fleet Leviathan, I think the sweet spot to be in is somewhere around Strength 5 or Strength 6. The only reason Strength 6 is a big deal is because the Maleceptor Aura will drop Strength 5 to Strength 4, which means you wound T8 on 6s and you wound any of the T5 stuff on 4s. So that affects you by the Maleceptor Aura, but Strength 6 is unaffected because its math isn't going to change. Most of the T5 stuff you're winning on 4s because it's transhuman anyway, and then you don't care about shooting the T8 stuff. And high volume at that Strength 6, AP1 specifically, because that puts most Tyranid things on their invulnerable save, is kind of exactly the profile that you want to hit. So one thing that we were talking about, potentially as an answer to other Tyranid lists, was that High Fleet Gorgon list, where you can in a Tyranid list you can bring mass amounts of Strength 4 with the Gorgon ability, either through things like Pyrovores. You could even take Devourers on stuff, and then you could use that 4+ poison to really punish a relatively like low armor saves and high toughness values on a lot of the Tyranid monsters and things. You still need some armor cracking in there, so you probably take like Double Hive Tyrant to try to clear out the big armored stuff, but you can clip out stuff like these big Tyranid warrior bricks really easily. So this is single Maleceptor, but then here's the double Harpies. 2 heavy Venom Cannons, 1 with Synaptic Enhancement. So not even putting the Dermic Symbiosis on the second one. Again, because if you do have access to that Zone Thrope ability, you can Hive Nexus the 4+ invulnerable save onto that Harpy if you need it. So the Zone Thrope's kind of coming in play there, especially if the Harpies are chained and you can link off of the one with the Synaptic Enhancement. You can make both of them super easy to kill, or super difficult to kill. Potentially even, chain both of them out, link the Dermic to one of them, and then encircle the other one. So you don't have to worry about that. And then I think the flex here is that we have a Foot Hive Tyrant, Lashwood Monstrous Boatsword, and Shard Gullet as well. Shard Gullet's been pretty good. For me, he's been kind of inconsistent. Sometimes he just flubs super hard. And that is why I like having perfectly adapted on that guy instead of the Winged Hive Tyrant. But I think there's an argument to be made either way. The other cool flex here is the terrain effects, obviously. I think it's pretty good in Hive Fleet Kraken specifically because you get that one hit reroll. I would be almost tough, kind of challenged to take it anywhere else because it's so much more efficient in Hive Fleet Kraken. But it does feel like against other Tyranid lists that are going to be trying to play that range game, and again, that are relatively slow outside the aircraft, you kind of need something that can reach out and touch them. So I actually kind of like the terrain effects, thinking specifically about the mirror match. Yeah, so when a Harpy is super far away, or turn 1 specifically, usually usually they will be they'll move too far forward to get access to your auras on turn 2, or they're just encircling, so it doesn't really matter. Generally they are going to be in the Venom Thrope aura turn 1, so that they're -2 to be hit. That only matters, obviously, if you have a hit buff on you, because you can't stack more than -1 to be hit, but you can counteract enemy hit bonuses. So if you're playing against Space Marines, for example, and they have a Tech Marine with who can give +1 to hit to a vehicle, your -1 to hit will counteract their +1 to hit and then give them another +1 on top. So they're probably hitting you on 4s, even with the Tech Marine bonus. Let's move on a little bit. So we have, let's see, Warhammer had a win here. And it looks like, oh, he has the biomorphologies in there as a reference sheet. Okay, so this is our first 5-0. So congratulations to Eddie Chate, I don't know. For being, I think, our first 5-0 with Tyranids in the new Codex. And basically take a very similar list. I think we're going to see a lot of similar stuff. So this is Battalion. So we're out of double patrol now. We're taking another Shard Gullet. This Hive Tyrant. This one is perfectly adapted, but we do not have... we do have Tyrant Guard for him. Okay. Oh, and then we also have a patrol. Okay, so this is Battalion Patrol. Interesting. All right. I don't know if you need that quite so much. Mostly to unlock additional elite slots, I imagine. But we don't need it. So it could have been double patrol. Yeah, it literally doesn't matter what he picked, because the battalion's going to get refunded regardless. So we do have the double Tyrant build, one with Shard Gullet. So we're already seeing a bit of a theme. Neurothrop with Resonance Barb, Synaptic Tendrils. Again, very classic. The big unit of Tyranid Warriors, 2 small units of Tyranid Warriors, 1 Maleceptor, Tyrant Guard, double Harpy. This one does have the Dermic Symbiosis on 1 Harpy. The other one with Synaptic Enhancement. So while it's on the table and it's not encircling, it is a 4+ invulnerable save permanently. We do have Zoanthropes in this one as well, so I imagine that they ruled that Zoanthropes are still do their thing. And to be honest, I think that Zoanthropes are actually not, even without the Synapse keyword, I actually think that Zoanthropes are still kind of relatively playable. I was playing some Psychic heavy lists that brought multiple Maleceptors and brought several units of Zoanthropes, and deep striking Zoanthropes onto people is actually pretty okay. They are expensive for the D3+3 mortals, but when you compare it to something like an Exocrine, their range is much shorter, but they'll do a similar amount of damage. They'll do, typically between like 5 and 8 damage or something, or 5 or 6 damage typically, and if you consider that an Exocrine will oftentimes convert 2 attacks through its like 7 or so. It's going to be very similar. They're obviously better against lighter units, so small infantry, like 1 wound infantry and stuff like that, they'll kill more easily. And heavy and vulnerable saves, they'll shoot through much more easily as well. The cool thing about Zoanthropes is that you can take them with other Psychers, and they don't really affect your smite chain so much because their bonus to smite is so enormous. But obviously, they're a little inefficient if you aren't taking them for their imperative, because 150 points could, for example, get you almost an entire extra harpy. So there you go. No one's playing lists with the Leviathan supplement, chat. I don't know what you're talking about. That supplement's been ruled outdated, and none of these lists are using them. They're using Highfleet Leviathan because it's the best Highfleet in the Codex. Because it gives you transhuman on all the warriors, so especially if you're bringing warrior bricks, they are difficult to kill. It gives you the free transhuman on the Synapse monsters, so the Maleceptor and the Hive Tyrants especially. Less useful because you can 1CP transhuman them, but it is nice to have. This list obviously is bringing just a absolute massive warriors. He's got 9, 15, 24 warriors. So we want the transhuman effect on them anyway. But having it on the monsters is also kind of gravy. And on top of that, it gives you access to Hive Nexus. So you can Nexus out the invulnerable save onto the big warrior brick if you need to. You can Nexus out the +1 to cast onto the Maleceptor if you need it. You can even just get warriors exploding 6s in melee. Like the Hive Nexus is so flexible that almost regardless of your subfaction ability, like you could almost just be playing a custom subfaction and you pick 2 biomorphologies or whatever. And Hive Nexus is so good that it's worth that subfaction pick by itself. So having the Synaptic ability doesn't give you the Synaptic keyword. That's correct. Yeah, it is possible to be, a Synapse, to have the Synapse ability, but not be Synapse keyworded, which is the case in the New Tyranid Codex. Probably a mistake, but it is what it is. That's how GW has written it. So here we are. So we're 2 lists in. I think the biggest difference is being the switch to additional warriors instead of the other monster in Eddie's list versus Spinung. And I think that's pretty interesting. I do think that I don't know, in my experience so far, warriors have been kind of fragile because they're so slow. But maybe if you do get to that like mass, the critical mass of them, they end up being able to push through. But so far, I don't know about the warrior spam lists. Obviously, this one went 5-0, so clearly there's something to it. But they are pretty easy to take down. They get killed eventually. So we also have a 5-0 list here from Renegade Wargaming. Yeah, this one also similar deal. This is single battalion though, so this is pretty interesting. We have a winged Hive Tyrant. We do have Tyrant Guard, but only to protect the single Tyrant, which is pretty Pretty ballsy there. Winged Hive Tyrant, no adrenal glands on him. That's pretty wild. We also have adaptive biology on that guy. So we're just going for big charges, I guess. If you're only worried about protecting the one Hive Tyrant, you can kind of play fast and loose with the Tyrant Guard, and you can throw him up in the middle. Your opponent has to kill all the Tyrant Guard before they kill the Hive Tyrant, so you're kind of not worried so much about that. The Tyrant Guard they're not the worst unit in and of themselves, but I don't think they're particularly efficient. With the Scything Talons, they can get to 6 attacks a model, but they... and their core keyword, so you can give them rerolls and stuff, but they're a little bit inefficient if they don't have any support, because it's a lot of 1 damage attacks. And there, one thing that we could see change in the future is a fix to the Tyrant Guard's Crushing Claws right now, because the only multi-damage ability that Tyrant Guard get is the Crushing Claw, and it costs 20 points per model. So it's 180 points to take Crushing Claw Tyrant Guard, which is probably a mistake. I imagine that they're supposed to be 10 points per model, but instead they put down 10 points per claw, and it's 2 each. What do I think a Post-harpy list looks like? Do you replace them with something different or start from scratch? I think you replace them... That's been an open question so far. You have to find another way to kind of reach out and touch your opponent. And I will throw a shout out to this list, because this list is actually Harpy list. And I think we can basically see that here, where the Harpies have almost exactly been replaced by 2 units of Raveners. Because you do need the ability to fight your opponent on their side of the table, and the Tyranids are pretty bad at that. We also have a Moloch in here who can also kind of access your opponent's side of the table. This being High Fleet Leviathan means that it doesn't have... access to OBSEC on any of that stuff, which is unfortunate. I kind of like to see Swarmlord in the lists that have Raveners, and one thing I want to start playing around with more is are just like mass Raveners with Swarmlord, because he gives them OBSEC, and they have the ability to fling themselves across the table. They can do pretty appreciable damage, but also just being relatively fast and being able to access that side is pretty strong. If you play in a faction that has Lurk Biomorphologies, you can also give the Hive Tyrants themselves OBSEC, and that's pretty good too. So, whereas the Harpies are basically just killing your opponent over the course of the game, the Raveners actually go up and fight with them and can take their stuff. But this list, generally, it has this sort of standard Neurothrope build, Resonance Barb, Synaptic Tendrils, pretty good stuff. Winged Hive Tyrant with the Reaper of Obliterax, Adaptive Biology. Like we said, no adrenal glands, which is, man, I would be like absolutely petrified I would fail charges without adrenal glands. Just being 1 inch closer, like 1 inch farther away from the target, I feel like a lot of times the Winged Hive Tyrant has to push a little bit farther forward than I'd like, and that gets a little bit awkward. There's 10 Hormigans as an objective holder here. That's interesting. You do get access to this. A lot of this list is about reaching out and touching your opponent, and the Hormigans definitely do that. They give you access to Boundless Advance or Bounding Advance, Bounding Leap, so they can move 16 inches and then charge. So if your opponent has a weak objective, you can use the Hormigans to trade for it. So I kind of like that. I like the singleton Hormigans. Generally speaking, I think you would take Gargoyles over Hormigans, but just having access to the faster unit is a big deal. And one other thing that I've been finding myself kind of lacking on is the ability to take... every time I play corner objectives, and I literally played a game yesterday where I had trouble with this. I had to Maliceptor drop turn 1 to put something on my corner objective because my opponent had gone first and killed all my stuff that could easily access it. So I didn't have very good options for taking those objectives that are, that require you to move like 9-ish inches. But the Hormigans being able to auto move 16 is pretty useful in those situations. So I think as we move on through the development of these Tyranid lists, we'll probably see this faster and faster stuff get taken, because that really is the weakness of the core stuff in the faction. We also have 1 big unit of Tyranid Warriors. This one is only 8. And I think that's fine because right now you can take Stranglers and Venom Cannons on Warriors, right? You just typically don't. I know previously it was limited to 1 Strangler or Venom Cannon per 3. Yeah, but now it's just 1 of each for 3. So yeah. So we have 2 Venom Cannons, 1 Strangler in the Warrior Squad. Bunch of Death Spitters. That might be another thing that changes. I don't know. That's along those same lines as like the Hive Turns being able to take multiple cannons. Not that it's as big of a deal on Tier 2 Warriors, because I don't think that use is is particularly abusive. I don't think the Barb Strangler profile is very good. We also have 2 small units of Tier 2 Warriors with Venom Cannons each. Make use of that Leviathan reroll. Death Leaper with Alien Cunning. So again, Alien Cunning gives it objective security and counts as 5 models when holding objectives. So again, we're seeing that this list being successful is kind of predicated on this faster primary objective control play style. So it does less damage in general, but than a kind of more standard list. But it is going to be much better at holding those primaries. We have a unit of Tyrant Guard, like we talked about. 2 units of Zoanthropes. It's kind of spicy. I wonder what the play pattern there is. That seems like a pick that the player here, this is Charlie Andre, would have a very specific plan for. Venomthropes are a pretty good offensive unit. They're kind of fast. They move 8. And they have a bunch of attacks that make you fight last. So being able to send 1 unit in with your first wave is pretty useful so that you can block interrupts. And then you don't lose your defensive aura on the swing back because you have another unit, obviously. But they're a little expensive for that. And especially if you're going to be putting Onslaught somewhere else, I can see them having a little bit of trouble actually getting to grips with your opponent. But, I mean, for 100 points, they'll trade with most infantry in the game pretty reliably. Their core keywords, you can put rerolls on them. I mean, they're just pretty good for the points cost, so I don't dislike them. How is Kronos in the mirror? Seems like Symbiostorm to boost Venom Cannon, Death Spitter, and Exocrin's really perfect against T5 and 8 profiles. So outside of if you're, I think a lot of times if we're talking about playing the mirror, we're talking about playing into Leviathan, right? Because every single list we talked about right now is High Fleet Leviathan, which means that unless you're targeting something that's inside an encephalic diffusion, Symbiostorm almost literally doesn't matter, right? It's only when you shoot something that's non-synapse, and your opponent will probably be playing pretty cagey with their non-synapse units. So I don't know if it's that useful. Like, it's good on... I think that what you want with Kronos is, like, Flamers. And if you're trying to build for the mirror specifically, I think I've been sold on the Gorgon Flamers. I think that interaction is very strong. So, I don't know if I'm sold on Kronos in the mirror. It's probably fine, but... the extra pip of AP in most of the situations is not going to be really doing anything. And the extra strength in a lot of situations is not really going to be doing anything because of the prevalence of transhuman effects. So you're kind of just playing for the extra range. Which is good, but I think the extra like survivability of an actual Leviathan list will probably win out. Have I been seeing more 2x patrols or single battalions? Definitely more double patrols. Or in some situations, patrol plus battalion, which has been a lot. I don't know how often you're going to see that necessarily, because you don't typically need the extra slots that you would get from a double or from a battalion plus patrol. So I think most of the time you're gonna be in double patrol. Not that it really matters, as long as you can fill those slots for a battalion, it's the same as a patrol. Yeah, so you get lurk biomorphologies out of High Fleet Chronos. Yeah, that's the big up for sure. But I think again, there's probably better High Fleets if you're like trying specifically to get the mirror match and you want the lurk biomorphology. I wonder. It's very matchup specific how effective that is in the mirror, because there'll be situations where you are also playing against a lurk biomorphology list, or you're playing against a warrior spam list, and in both of those situations, having OBSEC on your monsters isn't that big of a deal. You need to outnumber your opponents, which is pretty tough. Yeah, Gorgon's the other example, and I think it's awesome in Gorgon. I think it's probably like the sleeper hit in Gorgon for sure. So let's move on. Beerhammer 2022 had another Tyranid list at number 1, although it did have a draw. It drew with the second player, which is Drukhari. And one thing I will say is that if we look up a little bit here, we have been seeing a lot more Drukhari, and some of the other factions starting to bump up alongside these top ones. So the impact of the data slate is really being felt. We have Grey Knights being popped closer to the top. Thousand Suns are showing up again. They were probably the greatest benefactor of the Armor of Contempt update. And then we also see Drukhari pumping up, and I think that's because a lot of the natural predators of Drukhari were removed. You can also play Drukhari plus Harlequins. That makes you an Eldari army, but that means that you can, your Drukhari stuff is going to be doing a little bit more effective because you do have, access to these basically objective trading units. And then you can use your Drukhari stuff for either to be tankier if you're in Homunculus Covens, or to do more damage if you're taking things like Incubi. Plus the Drukhari characters still hit like absolute trucks. So it's nice to see Drukhari popping up, and we're seeing a lot more Drukhari, at this X and 1 bracket. I think we also see Frontier Open here was Cody Giroux with Drukhari plus Harlequins. It was Void Weavers and Sky Weavers. Void Weavers post data slate update, 390 points for a unit of 3. But again, they do add this long range fire support that Drukhari kind of has always traditionally lacked. And you could take Dark Lances in Drukhari, which in the current metagame, unfortunately, are just not very good, I think. But we have the Drukhari detachment. We have the Court of the Archon to be tanky. Drazar, as well as Incubi to do damage, Mandrakes for more objective control, and then a Ravager for fire support, and then we just basically add Harlequin troops and Void Weavers on top of that, which just makes the whole ensemble a little bit more effective, which I really like. So hopefully we see that happen more often. And I think we talked about it last week when we talked about the data slate, but I think the biggest change of the data slate is that it was mostly buffs, right? It wasn't all entirely nerfs to the top things. They also brought up the bottom stuff, and hopefully that means that we see more of these kind of off the wall lists of seed play. We also see Warhammer. We saw a Blood Angels list 4-1. Not something you see every day, but again, the Armor of Contempt really helping there. With these Vanguard veteran squads that have majority Lightning Claw, or this is all Storm Shields actually. Oh, this is like a classic Blood Angels. Oh man. A lot of times you'll see a couple Storm Shields and then majority Lightning Claw Chainsword or double Lightning Claw to do more damage, because they don't necessarily, the Storm Shield now basically only gives you a buff against AP0 and the invulnerable save. But anyway, we're talking about Tyranids today. So Beerhammer, we had 2 Tyranids at the top here. We had Garrett Olsen, top place. This one was actually Jormungandr. So that's pretty cool. And we talked a little bit about this interaction on stream the other day, where Jormungandr, I believe, gets Lurk Biomorphs. I'm going to double check that, though, just so I don't misspeak. It's hard to keep track of who gets what. They do get Lurk Biomorphs, Hunt and Lurk. So you can make all the Carnifex's objectives secured, right? they get access to the dense cover effect if they're far away from your opponent. But you can also, because the carnifexes don't split until they are placed on the table, you can use the Jormungandr stratagem to deep strike an entire pod of 3 of them. So you can have these kind of enormous bricks of your army deep striking for very, very efficient. And if you use, so I imagine, we have a Shard Gullet Hive Tyrant when we also have Tyranid Warriors in this list, which means we have a couple, and we have a 1 Venom Cannon Warrior over here. So we have a couple outlets for Shard Lure. You can also sometimes find a Lictor in this list, but I guess not. So you can drop like a whole pod of Screamer Killers, and then Shard Lure whatever they're hitting, and now they're going to be, you have basically 3 chances to roll out the 3d6 drop the lowest charge using the Shard Lure. So it's 3d6 drop the lowest for a 9 is like around a coin flip. You're somewhere around a 50-50 chance to get that off, and you have 3 shots at it. So you have a relatively good chance of getting through. Yeah, so that's super cute, right? You also have like there's heavy venom cannon carnifexes that can sit in the back. I like that we have Sporsis on these guys to sort of compound the cover. Woe is you if your opponent ignores cover. You just get absolutely wrecked, unfortunately, because you have so much tied up in getting cover and you don't get any of it. But it is what it is. Website is tournaments.discountgamesinc.com. I'll throw it in chat here. There we go. Ta-da! I guess the front page is discountgamesinc.com/tournaments. This aggregates a lot of top tournament lists from a lot of different games. Obviously, we have the Star Wars games, MCP, some of the other ones. So this is definitely the spiciest list out of all these. We do have a heavy venom cannon. So Shard Gullet plus Monster's Bone Sword Last Rip. No double venom cannons on these guys. But I think we probably was ruled against in a lot of these places. As much as I would like to see the old school Battleship Tyrants see some play, unfortunately, nobody taking those. I really like them, though. I think I like the Battleship Tyrant more than the hybrid melee range Tyrant. What did we take for Warlord traits here? No Warlord trait on this guy. I don't think you need it. If you don't have Perfectly Adapted, there's not really a good one. This one has Adapted Biology, so the 5+ Invulnerable on the Winged Hive Tyrant, and then he also has Toxin Sacs on him. So 6 is to hit auto wound. With Reaper of Obliterax, yeah. So what's interesting is the differentiation between the Winged Hive Tyrant, between the Reaper of Obliterax Hive Tyrant and the Moklaw's Thyrax Hive Tyrant. So in this list specifically, this is one thing I want to point out, and I think if I were building this list, maybe I should play more with the Shard Gullet Hive Tyrant. Like I said, he's been very inconsistent for me, so I don't know how much I actually like him. But with the oh no. The bots are back. Go away, back. Get out of here. With the game plan of deep striking these monsters to hit your opponent with. Interestingly, this list also doesn't have a Moloch. I feel like this wants a Moloch. I don't know what you drop for it, though. You spend a lot on Carnifexes. Your opponent is incentivized to screen you out with their chaff, right? So they're going to be sending idiots up forward that you can then kill. And the Maw Claws, while they are outperformed by the Reaper of Obliterax in the early game, if you're able to get a couple free kills with the Maw Claw, they actually, in the late game, they dramatically outperform the Reaper. And I talked about this in my Hive Tyrant video, where the math highly favors Maw Claws, especially since they auto reroll their wound rolls. And so you're saving CP on your Voracious Appetite when you're going into tanks or something. But as soon as that Maw Claw guy starts coming in with like 8 or 9 attacks, you know, stuff hits the fan real quick. So he starts blowing up tanks. And in a list like this that's trying to deep strike on your opponent is forced to throw stuff forward that the Maw Claw guy can probably by himself kill. So you can range him out, use him to clear your opponent's chaff, pull him back, and then he's going to be powering up over the course of the game for the late game where he comes in and just hits like an absolute truck. So I would actually be tempted to take Maw Claws over Reaper of Obliterax in this situation. That said, the Reaper of Obliterax has a... I guess I'm also probably biased because I played several games in which the Reaper... the mortal wounds from the Reaper are affected by a damage ignore. And while it's unclear right now, this could be the subject of an FAQ. It appears to me like the Reaper, the mortal wounds from the successful wound rolls of the Reaper's ability are still affected by anything that ignores mortal wounds. So if your opponent has a 5+ damage ignore or a 5+ shrug mortals, either of those would be hit by that damage ignore, despite the fact that the Reaper has an additional ability that ignores damage ignoring effects. So I've had a lot of situations where the Reaper of Obliterax is basically just a regular Monstrous Bone Sword because, it hits your opponent. Let's say they're playing Grey Knights, right? You hit them, the 3 damage goes through. They don't have a damage ignore anyway, but then you hit them for 4 or 5 mortals, and they save 2 or 3 of them. So you're only doing 2 or 3 additional damage over top of what the Reaper would normally be doing. Whereas with the Maw Claws, you're starting at, an extra attack, and it goes up very quickly from there. So your actual converted damage on your opponent is going to be much higher. So, and with Grey Knights looking like they're seeing more play, as well as other Tyranid lists, which have saves against mortals, because the Neurothrop Imperative has saves against mortals, and you can Catalyst. And, although I guess to be fair, the Reaper would be better against Catalyst generically, but obviously is affected by the Neurothrop Imperative. I think there's a really good argument to be made that you don't take Reaper, you take Maw Claws if you have one Hive Tyrant. The second Hive Tyrant should always have the other one, whichever one you didn't take for sure. Jonathan Shardgullet put in work for you this weekend, bracketed a Baneblade with just the Tyrant. Well, that's good to know. I guess the fact that it's AP5 is pretty relevant now because Space Marine's Armor of Contempt it down to AP4, which means it still one-shots a Space Marine or punches through a 3+ armor save, even through Armor of Contempt, which I didn't consider actually beforehand. I had so many situations where the Shardgullet would shoot and he would one hit would go through and he wouldn't even bracket a vehicle. And I'd be like, okay, cool. And then, the next turn he would overkill that vehicle dramatically, take 15 or whatever, and it would die. And you're like, okay. And then the next turn, nothing would happen. Having 3 high value attacks is a pretty big deal. What are my thoughts on making Hive Tyrant super tanky with Ymgar Olfactor and Maw Claws? I'm gonna have to reread Ymgar Olfactor real quick. Maw Claws, I don't think they don't do you any anything defensively. But Ymgar Olfactor is a relic? Is that right? What am I saying? Yeah, Ymgar Olfactor is a relic, so you can't take both. Yeah. So, you can't do that. So I don't know. My thoughts would be don't try it because it's cheating. Have I built my ideal Gorgon mirror list? Have I built it? I haven't built it yet. Maybe we can try to theory craft it today, chat. Am I thinking MSU Raveners or bigger squads? I think 5 or 6. I like 9, but because I'm like a Timmy and I like big units. But I think 5 or 6 ends up probably being the most optimal. Using the passenger to make sure the Tyrant makes the assault after encircle. I guess. But he does so much less damage, it almost doesn't matter, right? Like, you should try to be... the goal is to try to set up situations where you can... overrun instead of encircling. And then you don't have to worry about it. Like, the less you can encircle tyrants, the better. And I actually think that, you know, if we see encircle go to once per game, then you're not even that worried as much. You're not worried so much about it, because you oftentimes only get one encircle on hive tyrants anyway. It's the harpies that really that really benefit from multiple encircles. Am I 100% on double Flyrant over one Flyrant, one Walkrant? No, I'm not 100%. I just really like it. I mean, clearly these lists that are doing well are 1-1, and so I think it's you know, certainly worth considering. But I like the spike damage over the sustain damage, because the spike damage in melee lets you actually remove things, whereas your opponent can kind of interact with a ranged attacker. I'd have to play more with it, though. I also tend to play more like aggressive lists rather than the more passive ones that really abuse the walking hive tyrant. So it might just be a playstyle thing too. But this event also had another 4-1 Tyranids, Casey Stengler. And this is this triple patrol? Did we get a triple hive tyrant list in here, chat? Oh my god. This is also spicy. So we had an undefeated Jormungandr list and a 4-1 triple patrol list. This event sounds pretty wild. I love it. This is Hive Fleet Kraken. Oh man, 2 non-Leviathan Hive Fleet said. Artivore said Tyranids are insane broken. Yeah, I think they're right. Well, yeah, you scrubbed to the beginning of the video. We had a whole discussion about it. I think the Tyranid Codex is ridiculous, and I don't like it. So this is... So we have a Neurothrope, 1 step ahead. So that's the CP regen Warlord trait. Reaper of a Blitter Axe, no other upgrades on a Winged Hive Tyrant. With Adaptive Biology, so 5+ Ignore. 10 Hormigans. So this is very low CP then. Triple Patrol. And we've already bought an Adaptive Biology. Although it does have the... CP regen, which is good. We have 10 Hormigans. Those are probably even more useful in this list because you can opportunistic advance them instead of bounding leap if you want to. So if you're just using them to contest objectives, the 18-inch move is even going to be more exciting. Although, to be fair, you could do it with Gargoyles and they go 20. We have a 1 unit of Tyranid Warriors, Death Spitters, 1 Venom Cannon, 1 Maliceptor. I'm curious about the Maliceptor in non-Leviathan lists, because I do think that if you weren't in Leviathan, the place it would live would be in Hive Fleet or Kraken, excuse me, because Kraken can basically double move it, because you can do opportunistic advance on the Maliceptor on the turn that you're using Psychic Augment. So the turn that you're +1 to cast, the Maliceptor can blitz up the table and get pretty far, so you extend the range of its effect. The downside is that you don't have that Hive Nexus to get the Psychic Augment when you need it. And without the full combo, I mean, a Maliceptor is good for a bunch of mortal wounds, but it's not like, it's, basically like a regular thing attacking. Sometimes you do 6. If you're not +1 to cast, like, sometimes you do 6 plus whatever your normal thing is. So, like, you're probably good for 9 or so, which is fine. But if you charge somebody with a Horus Specs, like, you would be expecting a similar amount of damage, and you don't need to, do all of the setup for it. Like, a Maliceptor's only does that damage on 1 turn, otherwise it has a little bit of trouble. So, I don't think it's bad, but it's it's been interesting to me, and I wonder if there's a universe where we start to move away from Malacipters outside of High Fleet Leviathan. They're so good in Leviathan, though. I don't know if I would ever take them outside of it. We do have a Tyrannifex in this list. That's okay. All right, he's just there, I guess. It's just a big man. There are Zoanthropes in this list, so again, we're using the Zoanthrope ability. One Dermic Symbiosis Harpy. Fair enough. Second Patrol Detachment with one Hive Tyrant. Just Heavy Venom Cannon, Lash Whip Monsters, Bone Sword, no Shard Gullet. And then we have a second Winged Hive Tyrant. This one with Chameleonic Mutation. Wow, okay. I'm curious about the defensive upgrades on the Winged Hive Tyrants, because I think going all in on it feels a little bit, it's a lot. And the goal is generally for the Winged Hive Tyrants not to be in the line of fire. But if you are triple patrol, you're kind of light on the ground, so I don't hate it. So this guy has Alien Cunning, so he's objective secured. And a Chameleonic Mutation, I believe, is -1 to hit, can't be rerolled against. It is. -1 to hit, cannot be rerolled every time an attack is made against them. So you can stack it to -2 with Venom Tropes. But again, like, if you're in the Venom Thrope aura, you're going to be... you're probably next to Tyrant Guard anyway. But we do have triple wing... It's triple Tyrant, so you can only really set up 2 of them. Having one of them that's really difficult to kill who can run out and obsec objectives away does seem pretty sick. I don't dislike it. That's pretty cool. Tyranid Codex isn't broken mechanically. Strong, but not broken. It's more that things are unaccosted and too easily spammable. I mean, what? I don't know if I agree with that. Have you seen a Harpy? All right. Well, I think that is... that's all the Tyranid list from this weekend. But out of the... this one used the new Codex, yeah. So out of... And then the Radicalism used the old Codex. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6... We had 7 events over the course of the weekend that used the new Codex and were of appropriate size. Of them, Tyranids won 2, 3, right? 1, 2, 3, yeah. And podiumed another 1. Yeah. So 3 out of 7 on their first weekend out is pretty good. That's a pretty sick showing. Outside of Leviathan's Maliceptor, what do I think is another strong combo? I think that I think that's honestly that's probably one of the only like true combos as you think about it in the Codex. There are a lot of like one-to-one combos, right? So I think like the big infantry squads plus, like reroll effects are pretty good. I think the fast core units plus like Swarm Lord is pretty good. But it's a lot of like 1+1. Like I don't know, the Maliceptor requires like a whole list of things that all work together, and I don't think there's really anything else in the Codex that really does that. The other thing the other thing I think besides Maliceptor that's too strong is encircling a Harpy. I think that's ridiculous. Putting an Acid Spray Tyrannifex with 4+ in front of a Maliceptor and walking them both into the middle is super solid. Yeah, I don't hate that at all, for sure. Harpy is strong, but is it really a unit you'd say is broken from a gameplay perspective? Yes. 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 Honestly, like, I'm not sure what... In its current incarnation, I'm not sure what the points level would be where a Harpy would be fair. Unless you changed either how either how the harpy works or how Encircle works. But you could pay $250 for a harpy and it would be fine. You could almost pay $300 for a harpy and it would be okay. Like, so it's, yeah, I don't know. It's important to distinguish things that are inherently broken as a mechanic versus things being too strong for their point cost. I don't know what the difference is, to be honest. I mean, you could say that Bodyguard was broken, but it wasn't, right? It worked. I think that the distinction that would be good to be made would be to distinguish between things that are overpowered and things that are broken. And something that's broken would be an effect that doesn't work as intended, right? And something that was overpowered would be something that you think is too strong. Almost anything overpowered can be fixed with a points cost. If you said, man, Bodyguard is too strong, but let's double the points on every Bodyguard unit, it would be fine. No one would be worried about Bodyguard. If Sacrosants were 30 points a model, you would be like, all right, that's okay. Like, you can have Bodyguard, but at least your army is tiny. And if Tyrant Guard were 300 points, you wouldn't be that upset about it. So it's hard to distinguish, something that can't be fixed with points changes. And especially because Bodyguard wasn't always good. I was always curious as to why people thought Bodyguard was such a big deal. Because, and I mean, maybe it's because I play Tyranids and Tyranids had outs for Bodyguard. Because it's not, it's not entirely uninteractable, right? Your opponent can still do things. They just have to have the appropriate tools to do those things. So if you play, if you're playing the, Celestine, bodyguarding Celestine, and your game plan is to put Celestine in front of your army and screen for everything and make her untargetable, sure. But what if somebody has a melee threat that can kill Celestine? Then she's just dead. That's it. What if you fail your Litany of Faith? Then she's just dead to smites, and your opponent has good psychic. It was never uninteractable, right? It was just difficult to interact with. And the difference in the updated Tyranid Codex is that things are full stop uninteractable. And that is a problem. Yeah, chat. The Harpy is insane. Yeah. It's wild that we already had a metagame that was dominated by Adeptus Mechanicus planes. And I know playing on Tabletop Simulator, and especially competitively, we certainly saw the there's my desktop, everyone. We certainly saw the prevalence of those a little bit more than other people, but there was almost a full year where you lived in the shadow of, even almost more than that, where you lived in the shadow of the AdMech 6 plane, and for the reason that the Adeptus Mechanicus flyer profiles were ridiculous. They were insane. And while they toned the effect down a little bit by reducing the number of aircraft you can have, the underlying problem of adding aircraft plus stats that are too good together is still there. And I don't understand how we went with this, we went for this whole time where you would only, if you showed up to a tournament with AdMech 6 plane, you were 98% to win it. And they could just take that and be like, oh, it's fine to print a fucking Harpy. You're like, what are you doing? It's crazy. Not to mention the fact that, I imagine that the Encircle interaction, they literally just didn't realize. I imagine that they had no idea. Because they're not very smart. I don't think they put 2 and 2 together. I think they said, oh, clearly the intention is to use this on gargoyles. And you're like, yeah, but you let us use it on harpies, so that's what we're going to do. Yeah. So, I think that, yeah, it's a real problem, and I think the proof is in how quickly we can get it repaired. Because a lot of the lists that we just talked about today are double harpy archetypes, and those are going to continue to be good until the interaction gets nerfed, and I hope that happens soon, because I don't know how long the community can continue to operate with this specter of power creep, basically making it difficult to play. I know I'm personally I'm a little disenchanted right now, because I think the constant overpowered releases are kind of sapping a lot of the excitement from the game, and I know that's happening to a lot of my local community, and that's happening to a lot of people around the space. I think the data slate was a really good step in the right direction, but I think they threw it all away with the Tyranid Codex. You can't go through 6 months of after a year of Drukarian AdMech being a thing, you go through 6 months of releasing the most powerful codexes the game has almost ever seen, and then as soon as you build back all this goodwill with the community, you release this codex. It's like ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous. Which interaction specifically? Yeah, so it's the ability to you're a fast unit, right? So you can access anything on the table. Your damage output is already too strong, and for your points cost, and the and then the ability to leave the table at the end of the turn means that the downside of aircraft, which is typically that you only get one turn to use them, because they have to move closer to your opponent, and your opponent typically will target them first, is not an issue whatsoever. So you are almost guaranteed 2 turns of attacking with a Harpy. And a Harpy's already shooting, probably 250 points worth of guns for 170 points, and doing it at least twice. Currently, you can also do that with 2 Harpies, so you can do that at least 4 times, and that's a level of damage output that the game is not designed to handle. It's just ridiculous. It's just silly, chat. It's just silly. Can you share a Kraken list for thoughts? Yeah, you can share a Kraken list. That seems fine. You can throw it in the pastebin bot if you want to. So I don't know how long I'm gonna be live today. We've been live for 90 minutes. It's been a pretty good discussion, I think, so far. I think that definitely the upper echelon of the Tyranid list building has definitely been unearthed. There's definitely a lot of other stuff to talk about that isn't kind of this top tier list, but I think the problem that I'm running into just mentally right now is that it's sort of impossible to come up with a solution to this list using the remainder of the Tyranid Codex that's reliable in any way whatsoever. And I think that's going to be the case for almost every faction. If you go second against this Tyranid army, you almost immediately lose. And I think it's super brutal. So anyway, does anybody else have any thoughts about the Tyranid Codex? I'd be interested to hear other people's perspectives on it. I know I'm, probably pretty biased, obviously, but I'd like to hear if other people got some thoughts in. I've got some. I'd like to hear if anybody else had any interactions. Is anybody playing to go to sort of off the wall stuff? I know we're talking about a lot of Kraken, talking about a lot of. Gorgon, a little bit of Gorgon. I don't know what the final Gorgon list looks like. We might try more Pyrovores. Might try Warriors. It kind of, at the end of the day, might look very similar to a relatively standard list. How odd would it be to use Encircle to prey on a Hierophant? That's funny. I mean, the problem right now with the with the Forge World stuff is that it's missing a lot of appropriate keywords. So if you're trying to like meme competitively with the Forge World stuff, you have to wait till the ISE update comes out. And as we've been talking about, the length between the Games Workshop rules updates is getting longer and longer and longer. So when that ISE update comes out, I have no idea. I've said before, I'd like to see some actual mechanical updates to those units as well, because I think that, especially in comparison to the core Codex units, a lot of them are just terrible. And that's really unfortunate. I'd like to see them updated with some new abilities that might be better. But right now they break your sub-faction abilities, which sucks. Or your faction ability. You lose your sub-faction trait, essentially. Data slate should come at minimum every 2 months and include points changes. Stuff isn't going to stop if they want a healthy term of play. You gotta start reviewing a lot more often. Yeah, for sure. I 100% agree. I think that, I mean, we could harp on the issue of like digital codexes all we want, right? Because it comes up, I think, basically every week at this point. Every time a new codex releases and there are issues that need to be fixed instantaneously, people are like, we need digital format. And I think that's the case. And I mean, this is a good example of that. Alexander Lufton Neds. I'm annoyed how they're so good on the narrative TTS server that you can't play them. Oh no. That is unfortunate. When a faction is I mean, I think you can build, like, you can build in a way, you can build any army in a way that it won't win like automatically. The part is that I as someone who's not really a narrative player, I can't really speak for the the community that is, but part of the fun in 40k for me is trying my best and trying to build the best list that I can and trying to pilot it the best that I can. And it seems right now the archetype of Tyranid list that is the best has already been sussed out. We're 2 weeks into the Codex release. I mean, to be fair, it's a little bit different because the Codex was spoiled ages and ages ago. The list that is the best in the Codex is already out, and it in and of itself is too good and doesn't really require any updates. The awkward part about playing a powerful army in a narrative context is that you have to couch your list so hard. You have to sort of deliberately include suboptimal choices. And personally, I find that to be, just as souring, essentially. So any sort of meta game circumstance that dictates the construction of my army. So in this case, like, I don't want to play this army anymore, right? That I talked about at the beginning of the video, because it's too strong and it's not fun to play, right? But I don't like that is dictating how I build my army. And I imagine that it's similar, from a narrative standpoint, where you want to come in and play a cool list that synergizes well together, but those synergies end up being too powerful, and you can't play it with your opponent. But if you take random stuff, I'm sure it would be okay. Even their Crusade rules are broken? Oh, I don't know anything about Crusade, so I wouldn't know about that. That is super unfortunate, though. If their Crusade rules are broken, like, I don't know what you do about that, right? Yuhala played a casual Tyranid list versus Space Wolves, lost 80-10. Codex is not so strong unless you spam the OP units. I agree with that, for sure. I think the problem becomes, obviously you're depowering yourself, which always is kind of a feel bad. And if you're playing competitively and you hit somebody else who's playing the OP stuff, you're just dead, right? And that sucks. That sucks hardcore. But I do agree that I think I think Tyranids are very strong but not overpowering if you play just sort of a more generic list. If you don't take the aircraft, if you don't spam mortal wounds, if you don't do these big alpha strikes. Fine, you can just post it in the chat if you want to do that. I'm not on the Discord right now. The planet devouring thing are fun, but T9 hive tyrants are a little silly. Yeah, I can I can see that. Although, I mean, to be fair, you can just do that with regular warlord traits and stuff, right? You can make T9 monsters. But yeah, I don't know anything about Crusade, so I'd be speaking from a perspective of total ignorance. But it seems to me like the point of Crusade is to make broken combos, right? Like, like every faction has some ridiculous things in their Crusade rules that GW is just kind of like, I don't know, do whatever. But I guess if your broken things are significantly better than everyone else's broken things, then I don't know what you can do about that. There are only postal top destroyers for yeah. There's a there's a relic, I think, that gives +1 toughness in Gorgon. I want to say gets a +1 toughness relic. What do I think about the 150 Gantz and 3 Tervigan list? Meme or good? Oh, I think it's a meme. I think that's meme as hell. It's definitely fun, but I think you end up losing Termagants in chunks of 30 way too often, I think. Which of the 3 secondaries do I think is best? Synaptic Insight might be the best one, since you can give Synaptic Enhancement to an Exocrine. So, it's hard to say which one is best, because some of them are very situational, right? So, Synaptic Insight and Cranial Feeding both require very specific compositions out of your opponent. And they also kind of overlap with existing secondaries. So Synaptic Insight is like almost the no prisoners with extra steps. And Cranial Feeding is almost grind them down with extra steps. So those, like, it's hard to say which one of those is best, because it's like, well, it depends on what your opponent's playing. If your opponent's playing, like Harlequins or whatever, I guess like Harlequins might be okay for feeding or whatever. But if your opponent's playing something that doesn't give up very many points on those secondaries, they're both gonna be terrible. But if your opponent's playing like Space Marines and you have all melee, you're like, oh, Cranial Feeding, seems good, because you have all the brains. Another thing that does need to be eroded probably, or FAQ'd, is the third secondary, the Spore Node secondary, because the way it places its marker can lead you to a situation where you can complete the secondary but not place the marker, and the game basically blue screens. There's no way to resolve the effect in some circumstances, because you have to place the marker within 1 inch of you and wholly within your opponent's deployment zone, but you start the action within 6 inches of their deployment zone. So you can have this situation where you're not close enough to the deployment zone to put the marker in it, but you're within range to do the action that places the marker. So you do the action. Once the action completes, the game ends. Like, you time out, I guess. I don't know. I have no idea. Nobody knows how it's supposed to work. I think if I were to pick like a best secondary, like it might be that one, because that's the one you can build for to do consistently. Whether or not I think that's a good secondary is a different question. I think it's worth thinking about for sure. You could maybe do, like, if we're talking about doing these big Gantt spam sort of endless swarm style lists, that's a good secondary to think about, because you can get gargoyles across the table really quickly, and I think that's pretty solid. But otherwise, yeah, I think it's a little bit awkward. Tried 120 Termagants in one Tervigan Turbigon, excuse me. Problem is that Gaunts are expensive and they don't do any damage. Yeah, so that's like, I mean, that's the classic problem with any horde list, right? And that was the problem in 8th edition with the Gant carpet list, is that you trade models to score victory points, right? It's a very simple arithmetic, and at least it was in 8th edition with end of turn scoring, where your models would sacrifice themselves, you'd move them far up the table, they would take all the objectives, you would score, you know, hold, kill, hold more, and then they would be dead. Your opponent would kill them. Now, the problem there is that you would run out of steam so quickly, because 40k is so lethal, and it gets exponentially more lethal the closer you get to your opponent. Because not only, you know, at long distance they can shoot you, at medium distance they can shoot you and psychic you, at short distance they can shoot you, psychic you, and fight you. So the closer you get, the more damage they do. And the goal is to move those units up, and you know, closer to your opponent, so they do deal more damage to you. And the big problem now is that not only are things more toxic to horde lists than they've ever have been in the past, because the blast keyword exists, because weapon rate of fires have been shooting up dramatically, because just the average damage output of the game has been dramatically increased. But also, you have to, in order for that unit to be relevant, besides knocking your opponent down victory points, you need to be, you need to survive until the subsequent turn, and that's never going to happen because you're sacrificing those units for the ability to hold that objective, or for those victory points. So if you're sacrificing them and they still die and you don't get any benefit, it's not good. You're spending them for nothing. Not to mention the fact that the entire army is slower than it was in the past, because you had multiple double moves available to it. It does pretty much the same damage, but everything got more expensive. It's just not good. All right, so let's take a look at this list. Let's go. Put it on my screen here. So Kraken and Patrol. Got a walking tyrant, one step ahead with Shard Gullet. I love it. I definitely think I think that every time I see a Kraken list that doesn't have one step ahead, I kind of I look askance at it, because it's such a good ability. I do question the lack of Resonance Barb in the Neurothrope. I think you'll want that. It's just such a problem solver. Being able to stack those multiple buffs on it, super good. Because the Neurothrope, especially in Kraken, probably more so than any other subfaction, because you're going to be opportunistic advancing over the course of the game, you need Onslaught to go off. And if your Onslaught doesn't go off, you're in a bad spot. It's units of 3 Warriors, 1 Maliceptor, 3 Venom Thropes, 3 Tyrant Guard, 3 Powervores, 3 more Powervores, 3 Zone Thropes. 2 units of 5 Raveners, love it. 3 Screamer Killers. Interesting. I don't think you need 2 units of 3 Pyrovores. You could cut. We're at the Tyrant Guard are free. The Zone Thropes are free. So we're maxed on elites. So I would cut 3 or 4 Pyrovores and just take probably more Warriors. 4 Pyrovores gets you 120 points, right? So you're up to another 5 or 6 Warriors. And being able to rocket, because the Warriors have objective secured, they're sort of more valuable to run at your opponent than anything else. Because the goal is to try to contest objectives with the OBSEC stuff. And if you can do it with big Warrior units, I think that's just better for you. And that's especially because the Pyrovores, they operate very similarly to a lot of the other stuff you have here. So you have Raveners that have Death Spitters. Essentially everything in the game, in the army, kills enemies at 18 inches, right? So taking a bunch of Pyrovores doesn't help you to do that. you even like zone thropes, they smite at 18 inches. The Maleceptor kills everything within 12 and can push its threat range up to 26. The Raveners can charge things within 18 automatically, and they have good shooting, so they can kill infantry at that range. So you have all these flamers that are just like kind of there. They're like, we can also kill lots of infantry, and you're like, okay, thanks, Spirivores, but like, do I need that? I don't know, not really. That would be my change, I think. How dumb would it be to run adaptive biology and maw claws on a Turbogon with glands? I don't think that's that bad. I've talked to some people running maw claws on a Turbogon just to do more damage with them, and I think that's pretty good. Just take 250 points of Spore Mines. That's a good way to couch your Tyranid lists. Yeah. Yeah, if you want to play Tyranids fairly in a narrative context chat, just take literally hundreds of points, just dozens of Spore Mines. You can take like 3 units of Spore Mines. How many Spore Mines go in a unit? Like 9? Those things don't even hold objectives. It's fine. So you can take between 3 and... Oh, no, yeah. You can take 3 to 9. So you could take 270 points worth of raw Spore Mines. And then you could take the other... Mucilid Spores? They're 20 points each, and you could take 180 points of them because they can come up in units of 3. So, yeah, just take 450 points of useless garbage, and then the game is fine. It's all fixed. There you go. I did play against the Spore list on stream the other day, and to be fair, I was playing Carnifexes, which is probably, if you wanted to pick a bad matchup, or a good matchup for the Spore Mine list, it was triple Biovore Spore Assist, plus a Harpy to drop mines, with Spore Mines with the bombing. And I was playing no Harpy, and had a billion Carnifexes. And if you wanted to pick a matchup that Spore Mine list is excellently good into, it was the Carnifex list. But I do think that I probably gave the Spore Mine list too much of a hard time, because I do think the one thing I didn't really consider was the fact that the Spore Mines deal on average like 1.1 mortal wounds per almost automatically, and they trigger even if you move within 3 inches of them. So in order, like, if you take all of the damage from the Spore Mines, they'll eventually just kill you. Like, your important stuff will be dead. And because you're eating like 5 mortal wounds every time you trigger a Spore Mine. The part where things get really awkward is moving around those. So if you're trying to avoid triggering them, it's these 3-inch auras everywhere where you have to kind of squeak around. Although, to be fair, their ability is very ambiguously worded, and it's unclear whether or not each individual Spore Mine hits something within 3 or the entire unit hits something within 3. And I think that certainly needs an FAQ. Lots of FAQs required in the Tyranid Codex. 4-member fielded 3 Turbogons, 150 against the Jormungandr. Got first and removed everything with advanced blister of Turbogun and paired him 6-inch free game move. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. It puts a lot in the middle of the table for sure. But it's also, it's a lot that your opponent can kill then. And then it's dead. There you go. A lot of value in one big warrior unit. Worried that Levy runs it over with transhuman. Yeah. An interesting thing to think about is that, like, the only place that transhuman affects warriors is in melee, in the mirror match if they're fighting each other. Outside of their venom cannons, obviously, the venom cannons will wound on 3s rather than 4s. But as the Kraken player, you should be able to control the engagement, so you should be able to melee the other unit first anyway because you're faster, and like, their melee attacks aren't alone what's killing warriors anyway. So even if the Levy unit, like when the Levy unit swings back, because if you're running all bone swords, both warrior units have access to -1 damage. So the bone swords kind of ping off, relatively speaking. So I don't know if it's specifically in the warrior mirror if the transhuman is actually that big of a deal. The other thing that my opponent, when I played against the Kraken on Saturday, my opponent pointed out was that with Armor of Contempt now being very, very prevalent in the metagame, the Kraken ability for +1 AP on the charge is actually a pretty big deal. Not so much in the Tyranid mirror, obviously. you're all going to be fighting on invulnerable saves anyway most of the time, but hitting Space Marines, getting your guys to AP3, AP4, even the Hive Tyrants up to AP5 is a really big deal, because the thing that I was talking about when Armor of Contempt came out, and I talked about this a lot last week, where your AP4s would hit a brick wall on a 3+ armor save, and previously you would just kill everything that you touched, and it was great. It was very reliable. But now that they can 6-up out of it, it makes things a little bit awkward, and especially if you're trying to like trigger overrun on a Hive Tyrant or something. So you deliver a Maw-Claw guy or something into a unit of 5 dudes, you swing, and you should kill all 5 of them, but like you flub one attack and they make 1 6-up and suddenly one guy's alive, stopping you from overrunning. That is brutal, and that can, force you to encircle when you don't want to. It can potentially tilt the game really heavily right there. And so getting to that AP5 to just avoid that situation entirely is a very big deal. So I think I like Kraken. I'm probably gonna try some games with Kraken this coming week. If you're following me over on Twitch, I'm gonna be playing some games tomorrow and throughout the rest of the week. There's no word yet on Throwdown Thursday this week. To be fair, I am still having trouble getting people in the building to play, and I think right now people are a little burnt out, and that's unfortunate. So it's a little bit tough to get. It's tougher to get games in than it has been over the last couple weeks, but hopefully we'll get that resolved pretty shortly. But otherwise, yeah, I'm gonna be trying to play some Kraken. I think do some Kraken Raveners. I really want to try like a Ravener spam with the Swarmlord to get that upset going, and we'll try some Gorgon as well. I think Gorgon's probably pretty interesting. So some good stuff in the Tyranid Codex to play with, but generally speaking, the top echelon of the list is just unbelievable. It's just silly, and that's very unfortunate. Heavy Venom Cannon is only AP3. Let me tell you, Heavy Venom Cannon is fine. It's just fine. Shard Gullet's AP5. That's pretty okay. But yeah, Heavy Venom Cannon could be AP1 and probably be okay. It's pretty stupid. Anyway, chat, I think we're gonna go ahead and close things out there. This has been a pretty good discussion. I think it was a pretty interesting talk to talk about some of the lists that are performing pretty well. But I think really a cogent good discussion needs to be had on the power level of not only the Tyranid Codex but the other stuff that has been coming out, because it is deleterious to the experience of the game, and it is a really kind of existential problem for 40k. And I think that it needs to get addressed, unfortunately. Anyway, that's gonna be it for me, everybody. So thanks everyone for hanging out with me on this Tactical Tuesday. Come follow me over on Twitch if you're not on there already. There's a link down in the video description. And otherwise, remember to keep it classy and have happy wargaming.